Richard Mack is an author, speaker, former Arizona sheriff, and one of the most well-known and respected sheriffs our country has ever had. Richard and 6 other sheriffs challenged the constitutionality of the mandatory Brady Bill background check. They fought it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where they won a monumental decision for freedom. He is the author of The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope, From My Cold, Dead Fingers, an excellent book, and The Proper Role of Law Enforcement. Sheriff Mack just completed a run for the House of Representatives in the 21st District of Texas. Although he was defeated in the primary, his voice is still heard throughout the country as he works diligently to educate sheriffs from coast to coast. Earlier this year, he hosted a sheriff's forum in Las Vegas, Nevada. He recently attended the National Sheriff's Association Convention in Nashville, Tennessee, where amazing events occurred, including a gas explosion at Gaylord's Opryland, where 5,000 customers were evacuated. During the convention, Sheriff Mack attended high-level meetings regarding his constitutional stand for sheriffs across the land. He has visited with us before. Let's welcome back to the Global Freedom Report, Sheriff Richard Mack. Richard, how are you?
We're doing a lot better, thanks. Didn't get blown up in Nashville, and so I'm back on the road here in Texas, and I really appreciate that introduction, Brent. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. You certainly deserve it. It's been half a year since we last visited, so I want to start asking you, how would you characterize the changes you've seen in America, especially with respect to the police tactics and the attitudes of politicians toward liberty?
No, I think the lines are being drawn more acutely every day. The difference between constitutional sheriffs and peace officers are being drawn. Mainstream, politically correct law enforcement officials are digging in their heels. They're almost offended by what I'm doing, as if I'm trying to hurt somebody with my message of constitutional propriety and that we actually keep our word to uphold and defend the Constitution. I don't see where that hurts anybody. But a lot of these sheriffs are mad at me, and that's fine. I don't care if they are. I'm not going to change my message or what I do to fit in to their politically correct world. And I admit, and I've said this to you before, and you're very aware of it, that what I am preaching and the cause that I've undertaken is a paradigm shift for most law enforcement officers and sheriffs, but it's one that we have to make.
Well, now, you raised an interesting question. Are sheriffs, do you find that when you talk to sheriffs about the powers of the sheriff, that they're afraid to hear what you have to say? Or, are they actually frightened to take on the responsibility? Or are they disbelieving out of their ignorance or out of what programming they've been subject to? What's the emotional reaction that these people tend to have when you confront them with their real authority?
Well, it's anger, but I believe some of that comes through fear and, as you alluded to, ignorance. But I can't really put a finger on it as to why they have a problem with any of it. I admit it might create a little more work, but it's all going to create peace and safety within the county that they work in. And so I believe that a lot of them get mad, though, and I think you'll realize this, because they hear from their constituents. Why can't you be like Sheriff Mack? Why can't you read Sheriff Mack's book? Why can't you be a constitutional sheriff? Why aren't you a constitutional sheriff? Why can't you follow the Constitution? And many of the constituents of these particular sheriffs have hand-delivered my book, The County of America's Last Hope, and my new book, Magic Gun Control. Some of the sheriffs are getting these books handed to them by their constituents who want them to follow and read this stuff and actually consider implementing some of my ideas that have been expressed in these books and that I've expressed to you and other talk hosts and other patriots across this country for the last 15 years. And so yes, I am taken aback by it, but I don't get the fear or the anger, and why they lash out at me so much. Look, this is something the constituents have taken to them. I'm just the messenger here. If you don't want your constituents talking to you anymore about keeping your oath, or knowing and understanding the history of interposition, then tell them. Tell them. Don't come crying to me.
From the chat room, we had a comment, Richard, from GoThink. Thank you for following your constitutional oath and caring about your community and the people in it. Unfortunately, sheriffs forgot they are more powerful than the feds. Sheriff Mack, many have sold out. They just accept it to get along, and they don't care about the place where they live as long as they are safe for the time being. And then he has one of those little digital colon followed by an opening parentheses to make a frown, and says, "It is sad." And it really is sad. How do you respond to that?
Well, it is a sad situation. A lot of them have sold out. A lot of them don't want to give up the money and the connection with the federal government. The feds do support and all sorts of equipment and grants and other monies to a lot of the sheriffs. Some sheriffs have declined to participate in that process. The sheriffs who have declined such, some of them do it because of principle, some of them do it because it's just too much of a pain in the butt to deal with, and to do all the paperwork to get the grants or helicopters or other weapons or other things from the government. I will say at the National Sheriff's Convention that I was really, and as much as I've seen, I was really shocked to see the displays. Let's see, the guys that buy booths, what they are. I'm having a senior moment missing a word. All the people who bought booths and had displays, there was probably 1,000 of them. I would say, without question, the biggest booths were all federal agencies. Really? I would say there was at least 25 to 30 different federal agencies there. These booths cost thousands and thousands of dollars for one single booth, $1,200. But these were huge displays. I wonder what taxpayer gets for having booths at these events.
That's your tax dollar.
Why there's such a...
That's your tax dollars. That's what I say.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. And the connection between the sheriffs and the federal government. I mean, immigration was there, TSA was there, EA was there. I mean, I wanted to have a booth there to make people aware of who I am and what I do, and that the CSPOA is a viable organization, that we're real, that there's a solution, that there is help that we can render to sheriffs who are having problems with the Forest Service or IRS or any other organization from the federal government. I'm not necessarily automatically anti-Fed. What I am against is those who don't follow the Constitution, who usurp authority, or pretend that they somehow supersede the Constitution. And what really bothers me the most that's going on in our country today, not that we've just forgotten God or that we've forgotten our Constitution, and yes, all that is true, but the bureaucracies run our country. The bureaucracies run my life and run farms and businesses and families and healthcare. And so now we have all these bureaucracies like the EPA, the FDA, the Department of Energy, the Department of Education, Homeland Security, on and on and on, IRS, and FBI, DEA. I mean, there's literally hundreds of them, and Federal Reserve, another one. But all of these organizations and bureaucracies federal government believe that their policies and their regulations supersede the Bill of Rights, that their regulations are superior to the Constitution and Bill of Rights.
Well,
that's what bothers me the most, and there is a way to change that and to stop it.
And you know, essentially what you're saying is you have nothing against the feds per se. What you're opposed to are outlaws, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. When people in government disobey the Constitution, they're operating outside the law. They are outlaws. They are thugs. And you're basically saying you're opposed to thuggery in government. It just happens that so many of them congregate in Washington.
Well, I don't care who breaks the law. You see, Brad, some other law enforcement officials believe that it's okay for the federal government to break the law. I never thought that. I, as a sheriff and as a cop, I didn't care who broke the law. If somebody breaks the law, they're going to answer to it. Well, this is the same thing. Now, for instance, for the first part, what you were saying, I don't have anything against the FBI coming into my county investigating something that is properly delegated to the federal government in Article 1, Section 8. If they're there investigating somebody in treason or someone who has committed counterfeiting or any other crime as delineated and delegated in Article 1, Section 8 to the federal government, that's fine. But when they come in and act like they own the place and that they're going to arrest someone because he didn't pasteurize his milk, then I'm going to have trouble. I'm going to have problems with that.
And that's why we love you, Sheriff Richard Mack. 888-747-1968 is the toll-free number. This is a chance for you to speak with one of America's modern patriots. 888-747-1968 or in our chat room at totalfreedomreport.com. Before we talk about this Nashville event, I wanted to ask you about your campaign. Recently you ran for the House of Representatives in the 21st District of Texas. Can you tell us a little bit about the campaign and how you feel about losing the primary?
Well, I pretty much thought we were going to. I didn't go into this with any visions of grandeur. I was running against a 24-year incumbent. He's been in there a quarter of a century. He's a Washington, D.C. inside of it. He's quite liberal, so he pulls from both sides of the aisle, and he's got a lot of friends because he gives them a lot of earmarks and money, and this guy is a multi-millionaire. He's become very rich while he's been in Washington, D.C., and he spent, he got fundraising. He didn't spend so much because he didn't need to, because the press was already behind him. But he raised $1.5 million for the campaign, and I raised about $65,000. And to defeat somebody of that nature, and I believe this is an indictment against the entire system, the two-party system, and so forth, the political correctness of our day. If I'm going to unseat an incumbent, then we had to raise about $500,000 to $1 million. And I run because I thought people would really get behind this, and they wanted to do. Now, a lot of people didn't want me to run at all. They wanted me to focus my attention on a constitutional sheriff movement, and I understand that. And believe me, run was a very difficult choice. There was a lot of people that asked me. Tim Cox said, "Go get out of our house." As an organization that wants to get rid of all the incumbents in Washington. I think that's a very noble cause. But overall, I was disappointed with the fundraising. You're just not going to be able to unseat an incumbent. He is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. He's done very little to help on the Fast and Furious scandal. But, he's a very smart politician. And we just didn't have the time or money to really go after him. And I don't know if I'm running again. My wife and I are going to make that decision by September. There's some other people that really want to help me run again. Well, you did good the first time. Now that's a good stage for the next time. But you didn't really have time to go after this guy, you only campaign for 4 months. You need to campaign for a year and a half. And so there's a lot of things to say about that. My heart is at the CSPOA. As you mentioned, we had a convention on January 30th that was extremely successful. I believe this is the only solution that remains to the American people. It's the only one we got left. And one thing good about the campaign, I met a lot of good sheriffs around Texas and others as well. I'm endorsing a lot of good, solid constitutional sheriff candidates in Texas and Florida and Missouri and a few other places. So I'm pretty much a wash on. I'm a 50-50 on how successful it was. The campaign itself wasn't successful, but the contacts and the work that we've been able to accomplish, I'm pretty good about that.
Yeah, well, you're definitely sowing the seeds, and some will bear fruit. And you mentioned earlier this year, the Las Vegas Forum. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there and how that event has borne, whatever useful fruit it has borne since it was held?
Yeah, there was about 100 sheriffs there, and a lot of the sheriffs now have told other sheriffs how good it was, how productive it was. We're actually teaching these sheriffs the Constitution and jurisdiction and authority, and they're starting to get it. And so we plan to double the amount this next one. We're shooting for 300 sheriffs. I know there's a lot more sheriffs in Texas who want to attend. Last time we only had 7 from Texas. There's 254 sheriffs in Texas. We're very liberal, and they're not going to come no matter what. But at the NSA convention, I've met a lot of sheriffs who want to attend, and I'm just really optimistic that we're going to have another big convention.
So you're going to do this again? You're going to do it again?
Yes, September 17th, on Constitution Day. We're having another.
September 17th, also in Las Vegas?
Yes, South Point Resort Hotel.
Oh, excellent. We'll have to bring you back a little bit before then to talk in more detail about that. That's superb. That's superb.
All of that information is at cspoa.org or sheriffmack.com.
Excellent. We'll be giving that out a few times between now and when you leave us. All right, let's talk about the National Sheriff's Association convention that happened in Nashville. Now, first off, I got to ask you about this gas explosion. What was this about?
Well, I'll tell you what, it scared a lot of us. And I have to admit, I did not evacuate, even though the alarm was telling us to. I told my wife I thought it was a farce. It turned out that it was not a farce. And there was some explosion. Some other sheriffs told me later that they were actually close to it, that it shook the room they were in. They feel the floor move and the walls move. If I had felt that, I probably would have evacuated. But some people thought it was a bomb at first. And I guess we trust the investigators who said it wasn't. I guess that would be a pretty neat, not neat, but maybe effective way to scare sheriffs. If somebody from the terrorist group side put a bomb in there. The place the bomb went off, or the explosion went off, I should say, if it was at the right time of day, if it had happened during the day, there would have definitely been some casualties. It was a pretty fierce explosion. It was in the tower, an area where my wife and I were staying. So we saw a lot of the people evacuate. We saw the emergency response vehicles and teams. The ATF was called, the FBI was called, and of course local police. But there were over 20 ambulances, police vehicles, and fire trucks. So it looked very ominous, and we found out the next morning that it was a gas explosion. At least that's what the story was. And I don't have any reason to doubt it, but at the same time, it would have been a great story that some terrorist group bombed the NSA to get rid of a lot of the sheriffs. And boy, they could have got rid of a lot of sheriffs there because they were literally, I would say there's probably 700 or 800 sheriffs there from all across the country.
Well, I can't wonder with all of the, you mentioned all of the booths that were occupied by federal agencies. I can only imagine. I would have expected they would be out there shouting, "It's a terrorist attack" or something or other, because they do that sort of stuff.